The Banking Bros have brought in a beauty to launch 2025 this year. We're very excited to have Kim Butler on our humble little podcast and broadcast today. So, Kim, thank you so much for being in studio virtually with us. And we're very excited about what you've been doing for years. We'll talk about that and what's coming up very soon. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, if you do not know, there are many people smarter than us in this world. The longer you listen to a Banking Bros podcast with your hosts, Jadu
and Jonah,
you'll probably realize that we did not grow up steeped in the tradition of financial planning, financial education, and however you want to think about that, traditional planning or mainstream planning. I think there's a differentiator that Kim is going to talk about here today. In that space, we love to go to folks who know more than us. We want to get into that space where you have those folks, not just the 5 people you talk to most, but I'm learning it's the 5 people you compare yourself to the most. And this lady is one of those people. So this young lady, Kim Butler, and her team, which also includes her husband and their wonderful community around the math. Money is not math, math is not money, but they figured out how to tell that story, Jonah.
They have, and they've done it in really cool ways. I've seen, a couple of videos, couple of presentations. We've seen the handiwork after some of their events and whatnot, and it's exactly what you said. They've told this financial journey in a story with numbers, but they can relate it down to what makes sense for you to actually apply, and that's super important for me. We had a conversation about that over the holidays, right? Learning to apply or just learning to learn, and that's my thing, learning to apply. And so almost everything that I've learned from Miss Kim here is I can apply it. And that's what I've really appreciated about some of the things that she's taught. So without further ado, Kim, if you wouldn't mind, would you give us just a brief introduction on who you are? And we really appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks so much. It's such a joy to do. And holy cow, that practical application that you're talking about has just been so important to me my entire life, which started around money in the 4th grade. So a lot of people have heard this story, but yes, I was given a milk cow, like an actual real life cow, milked cow by hand, sold milk, put self through school. Like that's the short version. And more importantly, learned about money, cash flow in, cash flow out, what to do with it early on. And fast forward, it's been such a joy to be helping people with their personal finances for well over 30 years. I do enjoy writing books. So I've got a lot of material out there, blog posts. Of course, thankfully, all books are on Audibles because a lot of people don't like to read. Yep. And as you mentioned, Todd Langford is the expert in helping us put the conceptual things that are sort of my side of the business, if you will, with the mathematical or numerical things so that the material that I'm speaking about or writing about has proof. And it has that practical application, not only to our brains, but what we're actually doing with our money. And this is my life, and I love it, and I'm looking forward to the next 30 years. All
right. Now, Kim, hold on here. We're talking about milk cows, and then we're talking about money. What century was it? This is the 1900s? I've heard about people like you, like farms and stuff. I go to the grocery store.
Yes. This was in Corvallis, Oregon. I graduated from high school in 84. So it was the previous 10 to 12 years to that.
Okay. Now, I've heard your story before, and there are great places for people to be able to find that. I do want to ask you more strategic questions when it comes to financial planning or traditional financial planning. I've heard you try to differentiate what it is that you do and we do from traditional financial planning and or typical or normal. What words is it that you use that help people understand the difference maybe, but we're trying to tell the whole truth and not just a piece of market or return-based theology, I guess?
Yep, well said. And this, I think because I'm an English major, This is a hang up of mine, but I think it's so important. And we all know words are important, and we got to pay very close attention to what's coming out of our mouth.
Yep.
So here's my take on it. The work that you guys do, that we do, that surround finances is traditional. It has been centuries old work. It has stood the test of time. It is traditional in every sense of the word, meaning not only has it been around, but it's repeated itself and its effectiveness. Everything else that you see in the marketplace, big word, but a lot of everything else that you see is typical. And what I mean by that is that financial planning, like literally that term, only came into play around the 1950s. And there are so many spaces from the 1950s forward that create risk and what I would call typical financial planning that are not as effective as that long-term traditional centuries old space that we work with that tends to not be as risk oriented and is truly steeped in tradition. So that's my dichotomy, if you will, is it's traditional work versus typical work.
Now, why do you have such a bent toward traditional work? As far as I recall, hearing your story in other places, you got trained out of school in some typical ways. But now you're a traditional advocate, as we are. What made you cross over to the dark side? How'd this go?
I saw it. Yeah, it is. We are the redheaded stepchildren of the financial services industry, right? And let's just bridge one more gap for the listeners, which is traditional work typically involves the utilization of a centuries old product known as whole life insurance. And this is dividend paying from a mutual company. And there's probably only about 15, maybe 20 mutual companies that exist in the world today. Now, there's other aspects of that traditional work. Nevertheless, to answer your question, it's what the transition was for me, an environment of what worked versus what didn't work. Because typical financial planning has a whole bunch of things that don't always work. They might work, but they might not work. And I got tired of seeing that. I got tired of having my own money lost. I got tired of having clients' money lost. And I was not okay with it might work. And so I switched whole
hog,
entirely.
right? Whole hog, right? Is that
great
whole cow,
word.
whole hog, whole bacon, whatever?
Whole milk cow.
Whole
if you will,
milk, whole
if you
life.
will.
I love it.
And it is such a great word, right? Because whole life should work for us our whole life. And it will if you'll just apply a little bit of strategy to make it the most effective thing that it is. And it just drives so much confidence and peace of mind.
Okay, now you have doubled down on that 5-letter word, whole, with a W. Many people think that's a throwaway word. And they say, well, is this the same thing as universal life insurance? Came into play about 1980 or so. I know you have had a past in the universal life insurance space. You've dabbled. You may have sold it as well. Why whole? What's the difference? Many people are still asking this question, and they're saying, hey, returns can be more significant in the universal space. It works very similarly with loan provisions. Do you agree?
So you used really critical words there. Returns can be, which means they might not be.
Yep.
And universal life works very similarly to whole life, which means it's not exactly whole life. And so again, and you said it, we've got universal life that's been around since the 80s, give or take, or we've got a centuries old product, literally 100, 200, 600 years old if you go back to Europe and some of the original formations of the product known as whole life.
That's right.
So if you're in your 30s and you're looking at another 70, 80, 90 years to live, if you're in your 50s and you're looking at another 50, 60, 70 years to live, because living to 120 is going to become pretty normal, you tell me what product you want. Do you want something that's been around over 100 years, or do you want something that's been around less than half that time?
That's a great point. And I think it's a great question. And I know that Todd, who your partner in life and business, walks through a lot of that in one of your companies. Can you tell us a little bit about that company? I know you've got some new stuff coming out. We want to talk about that. We're excited to read it. But you guys have been doing something for 20, 30 years now in training folks who are in the traditional space like us, helping us with tools out there. So walk us through that. And what is Todd's forte?
Well, I'll answer the Todd question first, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the new things that are coming out, because they actually exist in both companies. So Todd Langford, my husband, is the creator of Truth Concepts. And Truth Concepts is a suite of calculators designed for the financial advisor that works in the traditional space. So these are typically whole life friendly financial advisors. And I should make it very clear that they help people buy term insurance as well. And they may or may not also work in the typical space, which would be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, et cetera, et cetera. So Todd Langford, Truth Concepts. Interestingly enough, there are clients, prospects, if you will, people that are not financial advisors that do go and look at that software, because some people are really math nerds and they love to look at financial software. Have at it. It's all there at truthconcepts.com. Todd also does training, and we do that together because Todd has an analytical brain. I have a very conceptual brain. And so to make the crossover, if you will, my company is Prosperity Thinkers. And again, all information, I'm sure you guys will have all this in the show notes.
That's right.
At prosperitythinkers.com, this is where all of our books are written, because it takes a team to write a book. They're on Amazon, but nevertheless, the work is done by the team. And what's cool about the books, of course, I'm not biased at all, is that they bring in the best of the conceptual and the analytical, or if you will, the story plus the math, so that the books are steeped in truth. Proven truth about whatever the subject may be. So there's books about mortgages, 401k plans, life insurance, college education, fill in the blank. I got over 10 of them on Amazon. I forget which ones they are sometimes.
Okay. Now, speaking of books, one of the original books that changed my life when it came to financial thinking, okay, there were two that originated for me. One, I have more conversations about now than I even did when I was the biggest fan. And that was Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. That for me. But around that time, about a year later, I was working for a man who owned his own business. I was just getting out of school. This is 2006, 2007. And he was moving from a very modest home in the Southeast where we live, South Carolina. And he was building his own house, and it had an elevator in it. Now, I'm like his right-hand man. So I'm on his insurance for his truck. I'm delivering supplies. He had a cleaning company. So we're doing construction cleanup. We're doing custodial services. And I saw this book on his shelf. I stole it. And it said, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it really revolutionized my thinking. I didn't tell him I'd stolen it until I'd read it, and then I'm in the cab of his truck with him. We're going somewhere to deliver soap and toilet paper. And I said, you need to explain to me why I'm graduating from college right now with a communication degree. You have all the time you want to coach your boys in soccer, to ride around with me. I drop you off at night and keep your truck. And you have me running around mopping every building. You have a life that I was not just taught in school. I need to understand, what are they talking about in this book? I read it. Here's the question, Kim. Did you write this book? That's what I wondered for a long time. Like, who wrote this book? Was it you? Do you know these people? What's going on?
So Sharon Lechter and Robert Kiyosaki, along with Kim Kiyosaki, wrote that book. And Robert and Kim were in my office one day. I had been referred to them. They were just normal real estate investors, which was a fairly large percentage of my clientele for a whole host of reasons, in Phoenix, Arizona. And they brought me this paperback book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, of which Robert had printed 1,000 copies and was selling out of the back of his car. And I love to read. I read fairly quickly. And so took the book home, read it, tons of fun. Way to go, guys. And what was unique about that meeting or the next one is that when I shared my philosophy around traditional financial work, they immediately resonated with it because traditional philosophical approach to finances is the rich dad approach. It's real estate, it's businesses, it's utilizing financial products that enable dollars to move. Whereas the typical approach is the poor dad approach, which is money stuck in 401k plans, money stuck in prepaying mortgages, money stuck in other places that we hear about typically out in the marketplace. So Robert and Kim immediately were like, yeah, that's how we think. And my response was, holy cow, I've never had somebody agree with me immediately. I mean, this is mid-1990s. Internet doesn't exist. And I'm one by one trying to talk people out of typical thinking into traditional thinking. And Robert is trying to talk people out of poor dad thinking into rich dad thinking.
Kim, thanks so much. Man, that's so inspirational, one. And it's also so good to have someone out there else in the marketplace that's confirming what we know to be true, what we believe, what we're helping the people that, like you, that are listening to this episode understand and think through. And so what I wanted to do, Kim, is ask you about some of those books, right? You said you've got over 10 on Amazon. I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you've got a new one coming out that you'd like to tell us about.
So yes, really right about, I'm trying to think when this was, a little bit after I had met Robert, I thought, oh my gosh, I am asking and answering the same questions over and over and over again. I've got to put this in a book. And so I spread the content of basically a frequently asked questions doc, an FAQ, right, out on my living room floor. Again, this is pre-internet. And I cobbled together what I thought was a logical order, and I wrote Live Your Life Insurance. And that wasn't actually the first book that got published because of a whole long irrelevant story. Nevertheless, it and Busting the Financial Planning Lies came out around the same time. And I had help writing Busting the Financial Planning Lies. And so those books are sort of the bedrock of all of the work. And I'm a real big believer in you do not be a one-trick pony. And so I was on a roll, and with, again, help from team, I just have been able to come out with a book every other year or so. And then, of course, Amazon came along, and Kindle, and Audibles, all of which are so valuable because people may not want to read, and so they can listen and, of course, do the Kindle thing if that's their mode of operation. And so it's been really a huge journey of continuing to come up with these busting series books. So I wrote Busting the Financial Planning Lies, and then I thought, well, people have mortgage lies. Let's bust those. People have retirement plan lies. Let's bust those. People have life insurance lies. Let's bust those. People don't understand interest. Let's bust the lies that are around interest, like car financing, college education. I mean, it just kept going and going and going. So now there's an 11th book.
Yes, tell us more. We're excited to have it in our hands for sure. And by hands, I mean it will be audible for me.
It will be it'll be digital.
Okay, yes.
We will read it.
But next time I see you, I have to have a hard copy so I can get you to sign it for me. I love that. Being friends with so many folks in this space and colleagues who are doing the traditional good work. But tell us about book 11.
It is called Busting the Scarcity Mindset, your guide to becoming a prosperity thinker. And the reason that I wrote this book is, as you all are well aware, what goes on up here every single minute is so important. And it is so easy in our world today to let what goes on up here in our thinking and our mindset fall into scarcity mode. And this is not, oh, let's put on the rose-colored glasses, everything's going to be fine, because we know that doesn't work. So what does work? And inside Busting the Scarcity Mindset, I've got 8 specific chapters with very small action items, because this is how we get results, right? We take little baby steps. It's never one big thing. It's always a whole bunch of baby steps taken over and over and over. And sometimes it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And so inside Busting the Scarcity Mindset, we tell stories because, again, co-author, it's always a team. You're always going to hear me use the word we. Might be Father, Mother, God, and me, but it's we. And within those stories are the lessons that we can learn to apply to our daily, sometimes hourly lives.
So the question is the scarcity mindset being so foundational and fundamental, is this book 11 a good place to start? If our listeners have not gotten to your stuff yet, should we start at book 1 or can we start at book 11?
You can start wherever you like. And book 11 is a fabulous one because it's truly actionable by anybody. You could be a 3-year-old and get some ideas from your parents because you're probably not reading the book.
Yep.
You could be 300 years old and benefit from this book. And the cool thing is you could be anywhere in the world. And all of my other books, of course, are written for Americans. So I'm excited to have this one out, and it is a great starting kit.
Now, I'm a fan of Prosperity Thinking and Prosperity Thinkers, the podcast. You have a podcast as well. We're subscribing to that and learning from your years, a couple of decades now, about 3 decades of teaching some of these traditional values. A question we get all the time, let me ask it to someone else. I have my answers, is why are these traditional values, thinking, and tools that we like to talk about so much, are they suppressed? Are they outdated? Is there a conspiracy to keep people from information like that? Now, at the same time, Kim, that might be a kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of question. And of course, leading the witness. We're on the same side of the pulpit as you. We're part of the choir here. But people who look like Jonah and I, when I say we, I'm often talking about us at the Banking Bros and the Cash Compound community. People with brown and black skin, traditionally in the 19th and 20th century, Industrial Revolution on, 20th century of big business, bureaucracy, and white collars. They're like, no one ever taught anyone who looks like us or in our families this information. Do you agree with that? Do you believe there's been conspiracies? Why is it that this traditional thinking dissipated and scattered to the 4 corners of sea to shining sea over the course of the 20th century?
I think the really easy answer is Wall Street. So first of all, everybody in the 1920s and 30s and even 40s, no matter the color of skin, no matter the gender, was exposed to traditional thinking, specifically whole life insurance and a mortgage. In fact, in the book Pound Foolish, whose author's name is escaping me right now, she quotes a 1940s article that said financial planning is whole life insurance and a mortgage. In the 1940s, a quote in an article in a newspaper said, financial planning is whole life insurance and a mortgage. And so what happened is in the 70s, when 401ks started out and the mutual fund industry came to be, there was so much noise out of Wall Street that it absolutely positively overtook the life insurance industry, which is the oldest financial industry in America. It might be the oldest in Canada too, I'm not certain. And it's the largest and it's the safest. If you look at the rating agencies, the life insurance companies, especially the mutual life insurance companies, which that's a whole nother ballgame, are more highly rated than banks, and they do bigger deals. If you look at where all of the large real estate transactions are funded, they're not funded by a bank. They're funded by a life insurance company. The big commercial buildings, when somebody buys the entire apartment building or what have you. And so I don't know about the conspiracy theory side of things, but clearly there's issues there around control and freedom and a lot of the values that are important to all of us as human beings. And so when you look at the capacity that, let's just drill it down to the life insurance industry, it is something that us human beings, if we can get a part of that, we want to. And that's the best news in the whole wide world, because it doesn't matter if you only have a small amount of money to start with every month. You can utilize whole life insurance as a part of the foundation of your finances. And between your good work and mine and a lot of people that you guys know, I trust that in time we will bring this back to the forefront of personal financial decisions and thinking.
I love that, Kim. Thank you so much for being on today with us and our podcast and talking to our audience. We want to make sure that the people who are listening know where to find you if they want more information on prosperity thinking. Can you please tell us where we should go, where we can get the book, when the book's coming out, where we should go to be able to listen to you and find you again?
Well, thank you so much. We've actually made your community a special page, and it is prosperitythinkers.com. I know you'll have this in the show notes, /special/the Cash Compound Podcast. Way long URL. Thank you for putting that in the show notes.
Yep.
And on that is a gift that we have for your community called the 7 Phases of Perpetual Wealth. One of the books that I wrote is called Perpetual Wealth. Of course, all of the books are on Amazon and Audibles and Kindle as stated. And you can just go to the Kim Butler author page and see them all for people that like to learn that way. And then this 7 Phases document is valuable because it enables people to see how to utilize whole life insurance through their whole life.
I love that. Well, thank you for that gift there. That is something that's going to be available for everybody, downloadable. Take that home. When you get into busting the scarcity mindset, before we go, pull us out a nugget there. What are we going to learn there? What are some of those top tips that we can take home here for a preview for our audience who wants to get that book? What's inside that book that we want?
So this book, you asked it earlier, is going to launch on March 25th of 2025. So 3/25/25. And it has a bunch of goodies in it. Like I said, all actionable. One specific one that I'll share is to utilize money as a tool. And so in that chapter are some stories about utilization, because so much of the typical financial planning space is just about shoving the money into some account for later. We want to utilize it now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I like using money.
Now.
Right.
I needed some earlier.
We can do all sorts of cool things with that. How cool. Kim, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us and with our audience. I know I've got some items added to my reading list here.
For sure. You said several things, some historic things, and of course, we've got to make sure that we've gotten through all 11 here.
Yeah. Right.
10 so far. We got until this drops, 325.25 to make sure that we're all caught up. But thank you so much for that and your expertise and your willingness to keep fighting that good fight out there for traditional thinking, which is abundance, wealth, prosperity, and telling people the truth behind the numbers.
Now tuned to the banking bro. Said we couldn't make it. 3 settle. This the life we chose. Gave a lot of game. We never got a lot of things. Bow your head and say the prayer. We taught you how to be the bank.
If you are thinking about prosperity in 2025, you are going to love to rethink your thinking with Kim Butler's book series. We're very excited about her newest book and the community she is offering to our infinite bankers out there in the cash compound community. So go ahead and click that link. Join her community and get the free guide to help you with these 7 steps in 2025. We'll see you on the other side.